Welcome to the deep dive. Put on your thinking caps, grab a flask of potent memory potion, because today we are not just visiting Hogwarts.
No.
We are enrolling in the Advanced Philosophical Seminar. For years, these books enchanted millions. But what happens when you treat the wizarding world not just as, a fantasy story, but as a genuine metaphysical testing ground for the deepest questions about existence?
It's a great challenge. I mean, when scholars first began writing academic essays analyzing the deeper themes in the Harry Potter series,
Yeah.
there was a bit of an initial hesitation.
I can imagine.
They were coming from traditions rooted in Plato, Kant, and Sartre, and they were asked, is this really a source of wisdom? Could a children's narrative seriously tackle concepts like dualism, fate versus free will, and political corruption?
And the resounding answer, drawn from the incredible analysis gathered in the collection, The Ultimate Harry Potter and Philosophy, Hogwarts for Muggles, is a definitive yes. One editor confessed that they were simply perplexed at first, thinking they were, and I quote, just books for kids. But after cracking open the first volume, they were instantly hooked. They found that profound ideas were percolating under the surface, revealing a deliberate weaving of philosophical perspectives that address the biggest questions in life.
Our mission today is to use this deep dive as a kind of philosophical decoder ring, moving past the plot mechanics to unlock the series' profound insights. We are tackling the nature of destiny, the metaphysics of the soul, and the ethics of power and love.
Okay, let's unpack this. We are starting with the foundational questions.
Yeah.
What truly defines a soul? How much agency do we really possess in shaping our fate? And what complex factors determine our personal identity when our very bodies can change? We are jumping straight into metaphysics.
And to start, we have to establish the ground rules of Rowling's world immediately. Unlike a lot of modern philosophies, this universe is explicitly non-materialist. Matter is not all that exists.
Right, the soul is real.
The soul is real, and it survives bodily death. Hermione Granger, who is, the ever-reliable source of objective truth in these books,
Of course.
she states this clearly. Whatever happens to your body, your soul will survive untouched.
That is a critical metaphysical baseline. So if the soul survives, then the content of that soul becomes the most important analytical question.
Yeah.
How exactly does Rowling define what a soul is? Is it just abstract cognitive function, or is it something deeper?
It's something much deeper, and this is where the series leans heavily toward what philosophers call the sentimental view of the soul.
Okay, can you break that down for us? What's the distinction here?
Certainly. So you have roughly three common philosophical definitions of the soul. First, there's the Cartesian view.
Descartes.
Right. And for him, the soul is responsible only for higher cognitive functions. So complex beliefs, reasoning, language, thinking.
I think, therefore I am.
Exactly. Then you have the sentience view, where the soul merely accounts for the capacity to feel pleasure and pain or, to sense the world. The sentimental view, however, is different. It associates the soul with what makes us most human. It is tied directly to our moral conscience, our deepest emotions, our sense of integrity, and crucially, our capacity for altruistic love.
So it's not about being smart, it's about being good, or having the capacity for good.
It's about having the capacity for moral life.
Yeah.
This concept of the soul is what allows us to define humanity, not by cognitive ability alone, but by moral capacity.
Mm-hmm.
And Rowling takes this idea, which in our Muggle world is often metaphorical, we say someone has a good soul,
Yeah.
and she makes it a literal metaphysical reality that defines the person.
And this framework, the soul as the center of morality and love, is proven by the darkest of magic, the Horcruxes. This is where we get the ultimate philosophical test case regarding soul damage.
Precisely.
Wow.
Professor Slughorn defines the process for us.
Yeah.
You split the soul by committing murder, an act of utter evil. The question for us is what kind of damage occurs?
Right.
If the soul were Cartesian, then Voldemort's thinking should become chaotic or unintelligible after making one, let alone seven. But he retains all his phenomenal magical skill, his complex planning, his ability to construct elaborate plots.
He still plans brilliantly, casts exceptionally complex, nonverbal spells, and, he orchestrates a global takeover. His genius remains completely intact.
Which rules out the Cartesian view. Likewise, the sentience view is ruled out because his sensory abilities and his reactions to physical stimuli, pain, rage, fear, they all seem entirely normal for a creature of his ambition. The damage is not physical, cognitive, or sensory. The damage is purely moral and emotional.
Dumbledore's observation confirms this, right? He said something like, Lord Voldemort has seemed to grow less human with the passing years. And his physical degeneration from, the handsome, charming Tom Riddle to that flat-nosed, snake-like figure that serves as a clear, literal metaphor for that moral and emotional ripping apart.
Think about the impact this has on his character. The young Tom Riddle was a master manipulator because he was charismatic.
He could charm anyone. Slughorn, Hepzibah Smith.
He could charm them because he still possessed the ability to simulate human connection, even if it was selfishly motivated. But as his soul was ripped into 7 or 8 pieces, that ability to charm just disappeared because the metaphysical foundation for genuine humanity had been fractured. He lost the essence of his self.
He became terrifying, but he lost his seductive power. The charm vanished because the part of him connected to that sentimental soul, the ability to connect, empathize, or even just fake empathy successfully, it was gone.
Absolutely. And if the soul is linked to moral conscience, then the only logical antidote for soul splitting has to be a purely moral and emotional one.
Which is?
Genuine remorse. Hermione, reading from Secrets of the Darkest Art, confirms this. She says that the only cure for a Horcrux is that you've got to really feel what you've done.
And this is such a critical moment for the philosophical continuity of the whole series. It's not a magical counterspell. It's not a cognitive solution. It requires a radical moral conversion that Voldemort, having gone so far beyond ordinary human evil, is utterly incapable of achieving.
He can't even conceive of it. His rejection of remorse, of vulnerability, it ensures his ultimate fate. He refuses to repair his soul.
So moving from the survival of a soul, whether it's whole or fragmented, we also see these other states of existence after death. You've got what most souls just go on.
Right, they go on, and their ultimate fate is pretty much undescribed in the text. It's a mystery, but then you have those who choose to remain behind.
The ghosts, like Nearly Headless Nick, he tells Harry that staying behind is a path few choose because it's this sort of semi-physical, icy existence, completely devoid of real power or life.
They're just conscious echoes. They can see and hear, they are conscious, but they are defined by their inability to move on.
And then there's the Dementor's kiss.
The ultimate horror. Lupin says it's much worse than that, much worse than death itself. The Dementors perform this lethal form of psychological and spiritual assault, leaving a person existing as an empty shell.
This presents a profound, terrifying philosophical paradox in a world where the soul is supposed to be immortal and survive bodily harm.
Okay.
If the soul is the source of all memory, emotion, and sense of self, and the Dementors entirely consume it, what is left of the person who is still biologically alive?
Well, Lupin suggests the victim keeps functioning biologically. The heart beats, the lungs breathe, but they have no sense of self anymore, no memory, no anything. Philosophically, if the soul is the source of conscious mental life, then the person is truly gone. Only the raw biological mechanism remains.
So the body is effectively a vegetable, but a walking one.
A walking vegetable, yes.
But if the soul is immortal, how can a Dementor destroy it completely? Is it truly annihilated, or is it condemned to some state of metaphysical non-existence, unable to ascend or go on?
The sources seem to imply the latter. They are not just killing the person, they are trapping the soul in a state of eternal deprivation, a kind of spiritual void. This makes the Dementor's kiss the greatest metaphysical inversion of the wizarding world's natural order, where even murder usually leaves the soul intact.
It's a violation of the fundamental rule of soul survival.
Yes. It targets the very definition of personal existence.
Okay, so let's transition from the destruction of the soul to the transformation of the self. This is another huge area. Personal identity, when the body changes form, like with Animagi and the Polyjuice Potion, this really challenges the simple idea that the mind and body are separate, discrete things.
Take Sirius Black as Padfoot, his animagus form. We have that very specific anecdote in An Order of the Phoenix where Padfoot is so exuberantly excited to be outside that he chases his own tail.
Which is not a human action.
Not at all. A man in a dog suit wouldn't suddenly be instinctually delighted by chasing his own tail. It just wouldn't happen.
Right, so that's the crux of the Sirius Black paradox. If we assume Sirius is just a man with a dog's disguise, we can't explain why his human mind would get pleasure from purely canine motivations. It suggests the form is altering the nature of his consciousness itself.
If the mind and body were entirely separate entities, then the mind would remain entirely human, regardless of the vessel. But this behavior tells us that transformation is not merely an external change. The body is exerting an influence back on the mind, creating this this blend of behaviors.
But doesn't that risk losing the original human identity? I mean, if the body truly affects the mind this much, how do we know Sirius Black retains his full self, rather than becoming a lesser, more animalistic version of himself?
That's the critical tension. He retains his core motivations, loyalty, resourcefulness, his love for Harry, but he adopts the physical and sort of minor behavioral tendencies of the animal. It's a unified self, but a modified one.
And we see this with the polyjuice potion, too.
We do.
When Harry transforms into Runcorn at the Ministry, his core intent is human. He wants to save Moody's eye, to warn Arthur Weasley. Those are Harry's choices.
Yes, those are Harry's decisions. But the act itself is shaped by the new body. Harry suddenly finds himself with Runcorn's enormous physical presence. He notes that he thunders with a powerful voice dominating the atrium, and he punches a wizard with an enormous fist.
Acts of intimidation that would be completely unnatural for Harry's teenage body, but they are suddenly natural and appropriate for Runcorn's powerful form. The body constrains and shapes the possible range of actions.
And conversely, the mind shapes the body's expressions. At Bill and Fleur's wedding, Harry is disguised as Barney Weasley, and Luna Lovegood recognizes him immediately.
Right. She says she sees Harry in Barney's face.
Exactly. If the body and mind were discrete, Barney's face should make Barney's characteristic expressions, even if it's controlled by Harry's thoughts. The fact that Luna recognizes Harry's inner self reflected in an entirely foreign body suggests that the mind influences the physical appearance far more subtly than a mere disguise allows.
So this leads us to a unified theory of self in the wizarding world. Padfoot isn't a man or a dog. He's an indivisible man-dog.
The transformed person is a unified whole, where both the mind and the body contribute to the overall identity. The physical vessel is not just a costume, it's a co-determinant of behavior. It's a blend of instinct and intention. And this explains why Polyjuice Potion is so potent. It is not merely changing your appearance, it is partially reshaping your lived experience and your identity.
When we talk about identity, we inevitably pivot to fate. In the wizarding world, the ultimate symbol of fate is, of course, the prophecy. But as we know, the art of divination is usually held in utter contempt.
Largely thanks to Professor Trelawney, yes. Her classes involve what's called self-flattering nonsense. She uses these pseudoscientific trappings like tea leaves and planetary orbits.
And her most frequent prediction is Harry's premature death, which is, thankfully, always wrong. Professor McGonagall famously calls divination one of the most imprecise branches of magic.
It's the definition of unreliable knowledge. However, Dumbledore does acknowledge that Trelawney had two real predictions. What distinguishes these true prophecies is that they're involuntary, delivered in a trance state, and clearly magically sourced, unlike her conscious guesswork.
But even these true prophecies aren't strict, fixed fate. Dumbledore is explicitly skeptical, stressing that prophecies are fallible. He even encourages Harry to feel quite free to turn your back on the prophecy.
Dumbledore needed Harry to understand that the words in that glass sphere in the Hall of Prophecy didn't bind his future, absolutely. And this brings us to the famous prophecy concerning the child who could vanquish Voldemort.
Crucially, Neville Longbottom also fit the criteria.
He absolutely did. The text makes it clear that the prophecy might not have meant Harry at all. It was Voldemort's choice to attack Harry, marking him as his equal, that caused the conditions necessary to fulfill the prophecy with Harry. This is the moment where agency decisively overrides strict fatalism.
So the prophecy acts as a catalyst for a choice, not a decree.
Precisely. Voldemort chose Harry because he saw a fellow half-blood, and he believed he would face a greater challenge from a boy whose background mirrored his own more closely than Neville's pureblood status, his own biases, his arrogance, that drove his free choice.
This analysis connects deeply to classical philosophy, specifically Alexander of Aphrodisias, who challenged the nature of self-fulfilling predictions, like the story of Oedipus.
Yes, Alexander questioned whether an event is a genuine prophecy if the words themselves, once they're uttered and believed, cause the subjects to act in ways that fulfill them. A true prophecy, Alexander argued, must reveal what was already going to happen, independent of the prediction.
But if the speaker or the listener manipulates events based on the prediction, then it's just a series of manipulated free choices. It's not a revelation of a fixed destiny.
In Voldemort's situation, the prophecy was inherently flawed because he only heard an incomplete version. Snape was thrown out before he could hear the final lines about the power the Dark Lord knows not.
So his incomplete information meant he couldn't control the outcome fully. The prophecy provided the context, the stage.
But the actor's will determined the tragedy. Had Voldemort known about the protective power of sacrificial love, he might have chosen Neville. The outcome was the result of a flawed choice operating within a predictive framework, and this fundamentally shifts the moral weight entirely onto the character.
Which brings us directly to Dumbledore's core philosophical insight, the ultimate measure of character in this universe. It is our choices, Harry, that show us what we truly are, far more than our abilities.
This is the series' ethical keystone. And to understand this, we need to distinguish between the nature of choice. Philosophers commonly speak of three types. There's internal choice, act choice, and motive choice.
Okay, you've got to explain motive choice.
Right. So internal choice is simply a mental decision. Say, deciding in your head you want to sabotage a rival, but you never act on it. Act choice is the observable physical act. You give a gift. Motive choice combines the decision, the act, and the crucial why behind it. Dumbledore is concerned exclusively with motive choice because that's what reveals true character.
Can you give us a clear illustration of that moral weight difference?
We can borrow from Kant's ethics here. Imagine two storekeepers. Storekeeper A doesn't cheat customers because he fears being caught, fined, and jailed. Storekeeper B doesn't cheat customers because he genuinely believes honesty is the moral imperative, regardless of the consequences.
Their act choice, not cheating, is the same.
Identical. But their motive choice is vastly different. B's motive, rooted in duty and morality, is the one that Dumbledore would consider morally revealing.
And Harry's choice to risk his life to save Ginny in the Chamber of Secrets, even if it meant facing Voldemort and a basilisk, that's a perfect example of motive choice. His motive was self-sacrificial love and loyalty, demonstrating his true nature.
Exactly. And this emphasis on motive choice makes sense because, as Dumbledore states, abilities are morally neutral. Abilities are capacities. They show what we can do, but they don't prescribe how we should use that talent.
Both Harry and Voldemort were born with extraordinary magical talent and immense resourcefulness, and they both shared the rare ability of Parseltongue.
That's the perfect analogy. Parseltongue is an ability. For Voldemort, it was a symbol of his heritage and his inherent superiority, which he used to unleash the basilisk on Muggleborns. For Harry, it was a terrifying connection to his enemy that he ultimately rejected and never chose to harness for evil.
The ability itself reveals nothing.
Nothing about the moral quality of the person. The choice to use it, the motive, reveals everything.
However, we have to consider the complication of self-deception. I mean, if motive is the key, what if the person is lying to themselves about their motive?
That's the fatal flaw in relying solely on self-reporting. Take Vernon Dursley. If you asked him, he might claim his motive for treating Harry terribly was to protect him from dangerous, magical, funny stuff, believing he was an ordinary man doing his duty.
Yeah, right.
But his real motive, often revealed in moments of rage, is profound insecurity, hatred of the unknown, and a desire to punish Harry for his mere existence.
So if self-deception can obscure the true motive, the ultimate measure of a person is where they stand when tested by adversity. The choice made under duress when the mask is torn off is the most revealing.
Absolutely. When the choices are difficult, painful, or dangerous, that is when the veneer of self-deception is stripped away. Dudley Dursley's moment of redemption, when he weakly shakes Harry's hand and expresses a flicker of genuine appreciation in Deathly Hallows.
Yeah, I love that moment.
It's powerful precisely because it was an honest choice, achieved only after facing the terrifying reality of the Dementors and his own limitations.
Now we move into the sphere of ethics, specifically examining how love, which is often called the most powerful magic, operates as a force for good, and how its corruption defines evil. Snape's journey is the ultimate test case for love and redemption.
Dumbledore staked everything on Snape's capacity for redemption, based entirely on his enduring, lifelong love for Lily Potter.
Right.
It's important to remember, however, that Snape's love was initially profoundly selfish.
Very selfish. When Snape begged Dumbledore to protect Lily, he had no concern for James or for Harry. Dumbledore calls him out on it directly. He says, "You disgust me. You do not care then about the deaths of her husband and child."
And that moment exposes the imperfection of his love. True altruistic love requires respecting the beloved's own chosen life and relationships. Snape initially failed this completely. But this imperfect spark was the foundational fuel for his later, conscious, willful sacrifice. His redemption required years of the toughest motive choice, serving as a double agent, maintaining perfect occlumency to conceal his truth from the most powerful legilimens in history, and protecting the boy he despised out of duty to Lily's memory.
His redemption wasn't a single dramatic emotional outburst. It was an ongoing act of the will to pursue the good of another, even if he found the task personally painful.
That distinction is crucial. It required a constant moral exertion. And in that willingness to sacrifice his reputation, his happiness, and eventually his life, he found a way to mend his own soul. A soul that may have been damaged by his association with the Death Eaters and his initial abandonment of Lily.
So his remorse, manifest in continual self-giving, mirrors the emotional cure for soul-splitting.
Exactly. Now contrast that sacrificial love with its dark opposite, coercive magic, specifically Merope Gaunt's use of a love potion on Tom Riddle Sr.
Dumbledore was convinced Merope used a love potion to ensnare Riddle Sr., and Harry immediately equates that action with the Imperious Curse, one of the 3 unforgivable curses that robs victims of their free will.
That connection is not hyperbolic. It's a profound ethical statement.
But why is a mere love potion, which just induces feelings of attraction, morally equivalent to a curse that enforces total control?
Because true ethical love requires respecting the libertarian freedom of the beloved. And libertarian freedom in this context is the genuine, unrestrained capacity to choose otherwise. Coercing someone's will, even with a seemingly benign love potion, deprives them of this freedom.
It's an act of theft.
An act of theft against the self. Merope acted selfishly. She was fulfilling her own desires without regard for Tom Riddle Sr.'s autonomy. She robbed him of the choice to engage in a genuine relationship built on mutual self-giving.
It's important, though, to acknowledge Merope's critical, redeeming free choice later in life. That's what sets her apart from her son, Voldemort.
Yes. Merope eventually stopped using the potion. She made the free choice to risk rejection, loss, and death. She chose character over magic, accepting the pain that came with Riddle Sr. immediately abandoning her.
So she wasn't destined for pure darkness.
No. But Voldemort, however, learned only the worst from his mother's actions, the pursuit of power and control, and utterly rejected the possibility of love and self-sacrifice. And that sealed his path through his own subsequent free, evil choices.
Okay, let's pivot now to the political sphere, discussing loyalty and equality. Hogwarts operates on this intense system of internal loyalty, house loyalty, which often mirrors nationalism or patriotism. The question is this loyalty a moral virtue or a moral vice?
Well, critics like Tolstoy and Emma Goldman argued that patriotism is often a moral vice. It fosters war, unjustified conceit, and demands preferential treatment based solely on accidents of birth.
And this critique perfectly aligns with Voldemort's Death Eater ideology. Their entire movement is built on pure-blood superiority, demanding preferential treatment based solely on lineage. They demand that the wizarding world prioritize those born pure over Muggle-borns, half-bloods, and non-humans.
Which violates the fundamental principle of universal moral worth.
Exactly. And this is where we introduce the core ethical principle championed by both Kant and utilitarians, that all people possess equal moral worth. Utilitarians hold that each to count for one and none for more than one, meaning interests must be weighed equally.
And Kant's categorical imperative demands that all persons be treated as ends in themselves, never merely as a means to another's end.
And Harry's allies uphold this standard, even when it's inconvenient or unpopular. Kingsley Shacklebolt's proclamation that every human life is worth the same and worth saving encapsulates this utilitarian approach perfectly.
Crucially, Hermione applies this standard universally even to non-humans by establishing SPEW, the Society for the Promotion of Elfish Welfare.
SPEW, yes.
She is genuinely horrified by the house elves being subjected to slave labor, and she's applying the Kantian imperative that they must be treated as ends, not means, to non-human intelligent life forms.
So if patriotism, giving preferential loyalty to your in-group, is morally akin to the pureblood ideology, how can house loyalty, which is clearly valued at Hogwarts, be considered virtuous?
This requires some philosophical nuance, and for that we turn to Martha Nussbaum's cosmopolitan view. Nussbaum argues that preferential loyalty, like house loyalty or patriotism, is justified only if it serves the universal goal of providing for everyone equally.
So loyalty is a tool, not an end in itself.
Exactly. The ultimate goal at Hogwarts is providing the best education and environment for all students, regardless of house, sorting them, fostering loyalty, and encouraging competition for the House Cup. That communal pride motivates students to thrive, which improves the whole system.
So if every house is loyal to its own and that loyalty is constructive, then all students receive the necessary attention and support.
Right. Patriotism becomes a virtue only when its primary function is to promote justice for all members of the society, not to promote the superiority of one group over others.
That makes perfect sense. Okay, let's look at the actual political governance in the wizarding world. The Ministry of Magic.
The ministry is frequently portrayed as bungling, incompetent, and even positively corrupt. We see Cornelius Fudge's fear-based control, his denial of Voldemort's return leading to international crises, and of course the tyranny of Dolores Umbridge.
This inherent governmental failure leads some political commentators to argue that the series supports a form of political libertarianism, favoring small, unobtrusive government and maximum personal liberty.
Proponents point to Dumbledore's consistent devotion to personal liberty, especially regarding the house elves. He doesn't wave a wand and force them to be free. He favors a gradual approach, offering them the right to be paid and take time off, respecting their personal autonomy and allowing them to choose when they are ready to be free.
And Dumbledore definitely maintains a view of Hogwarts as a testing ground, where Harry has to be allowed to try his strength, resisting the urge to constantly shelter him. That speaks to personal responsibility.
It does, but we have to challenge the idea that Dumbledore is the perfect libertarian leader. Libertarianism is not anarchism. It requires the political state, or in this case the headmaster, to enforce the non-aggression principle and protect citizens from force, fraud, and abuse.
And Dumbledore, as the ultimate authority figure, fails this fundamental duty repeatedly.
He does. He knowingly allows students to be bullied by Snape, endangered by Quirrell and Moody, who was really Barty Crouch Jr., and systemically abused by Umbridge's tyrannical detention measures. A clear-thinking libertarian would have intervened immediately to prevent this abuse of students' rights and bodies.
So the narrative suggests that the proper antidote to bad governance isn't necessarily smaller government, but better governance. Virtuous leaders.
Right.
So if Dumbledore isn't the ideal libertarian, what political archetype does he represent?
He fits the model of Plato's philosopher-ruler. Plato argued that the most intellectually gifted and morally virtuous individuals should rule, but only if they are utterly resistant to the lure of power. Dumbledore was offered the post of Minister of Magic several times and famously refused it.
He understood the Platonic paradox that those least eager to rule is necessarily the best ruler.
Precisely. His wisdom and supreme magical ability made him uniquely qualified, but his resistance to the ultimate political position proved his virtue. Now contrast this with the unfit rulers, Umbridge and Voldemort. Both are ruled entirely by a lust for power and excessive self-love.
Umbridge's immediate response to gaining authority is to impose vicious detention measures and multiplying decrees, a transparent manifestation of her inner craving for control.
And Voldemort fits perfectly into Plato's category of the tyrant. Absolutely. His unwavering egocentrism, his desire for immortality at any cost, and his utter rejection of the common good make him the ultimate example of the least trustworthy ruler.
So Dumbledore, the reluctant philosopher ruler, ultimately wields influence justly, not through title, but through earned moral authority and the deliberate choice to avoid seizing official power. We've reached the final frontier of our deep dive, the nature of knowledge, memory, and reality itself. The most intriguing philosophical exchange in the entire series happens in Deathly Hallows during Harry's near-death experience at King's Cross Station. Harry asks Dumbledore if the whole thing is real.
And Dumbledore delivers that profound line. Of course it is happening inside your head, Harry, but why on earth should that mean that it is not real?
That single sentence just demolishes a false dilemma that has troubled philosophers for centuries. Harry assumes that internal automatically means subjective or hallucination or unreal.
Right, and Dumbledore corrects him, assuring him that the internal experience and external reality are not necessarily inconsistent.
This connects directly to philosophical rationalism, the tradition of Descartes and Plato, who argued that our reason and logic are reliable because they are connected to an objective, transcendent reality.
We can connect this further to the ideas of C.S. Lewis and the Inklings, who, heavily influenced Rowling's intellectual framework. Lewis argued that if our thought processes were merely the random effects of material particles in the skull, then we would have no basis for claiming objective truth or valid moral judgments.
It would all just be random chemical reactions.
Exactly. He was forced to conclude that mind must participate in something universal, a cosmic logos, or divine reason, a shared rational structure of reality.
So if Harry's mind is participating in this logos, then an experience inside his head is not merely subjective. It can still be a genuine experience of transcendent reality because his mind shares a rational structure with the universe itself. The location, King's Cross, even acts as this intentional clue, linking the setting to the ultimate intersection of the mortal and the divine.
We must also note that Harry's experience aligns so closely with the common elements reported in near-death experiences, or NDEs, the feeling of peace, the presence of a guiding figure.
Dumbledore, in this case.
The choice to return and the presence of loved ones, even if unseen. The philosophical question here isn't whether Harry was physically out of his body, but whether the vision was a genuine supernatural revelation of the other side.
And Dumbledore's response confirms that an NDE can be a genuine, divinely created vision of the other side, and therefore objectively real, even if the mechanism is entirely within the mind's sphere of operation. The reality of the experience is confirmed by its moral and narrative truth, not its physical location.
Right.
Okay, let's shift our focus to memory and knowledge, specifically analyzing the pensive, which is essentially memory externalized. Dumbledore describes its function as purely epistemological. It's concerned with knowledge, preserving, organizing, and clarifying memories.
The pensive allows a wizard to extract a fluid, subjective memory, stabilize it, and then view it from an objective third-person perspective. This is a massive cognitive advantage. It allows the wizard to spot patterns, links, and inconsistencies they couldn't see when they were subjectively caught up in the original experience.
It's like an external hard drive for processing knowledge.
It is. And this externalization leads us directly to the modern philosophical concept of the extended mind theory.
Okay, break that down.
Exactly. This theory, championed by philosophers like Clarke and Chalmers, it rejects the traditional idea that the mind is contained solely within the skull and skin. It suggests that external objects, tools, notebooks, or in the wizarding world, the Marauder's map function as legitimate parts of our cognitive process.
So the external object literally extends the capabilities of the mind.
Yes. The Marauder's map is a perfect example. It allows Fred and George Weasley to track movements and plan activities that would be impossible using only their internal memory and reasoning. It functions as an external spatial and temporal processing unit for them.
And if the map is part of Fred's extended mind and George's extended mind,
Then their minds actually overlap, pushing the very boundaries of the self. Furthermore, the pensive provides clarity and objectivity, functioning as an external rational process. But this externalization and manipulation also poses an existential threat to identity.
And here we come back to the philosopher John Locke and his memory theory of personal identity. Locke argued that the continuity of memory is what defines who we are over time. If I remember being 5 years old, then that 5-year-old is me. Memory is the glue that keeps the self stable across time.
And the magic of the wizarding world poses an immediate and massive challenge to Lockean identity. Think of all the ways memory can be manipulated. The obliviate, memory charm, the implantation of false memories like those Gilderoy Lockhart specialized in, or the sustained identity theft performed by Barty Crouch Jr. using Polyjuice Potion.
Each possibility is an existential threat to the continuity of the self. Gilderoy Lockhart lost his entire identity through his own misuse of memory charms. He became a childlike blank slate. The man who existed before the memory loss is arguably philosophically dead, replaced by a new personality inhabiting the old body.
And we see the profound ethical complexity in Hermione's choice to erase her parents' true identities and plant false ones, sending them to Australia for their protection.
She did it out of love.
But she fundamentally fractured their Lockean identities. If they return and their memories are restored, they will be them. But if they remain in Australia, they are now different people entirely. This shows how magic can dissolve the very concept of a stable personal self, making identity highly precarious.
We've journeyed through an immense philosophical landscape, using the wizarding world to analyze the nature of reality, agency, character, and the self. What's clear is that the sources constantly tie together the metaphysical, the ethical, and the epistemological. Personal transformation like Dudley Dursley confronting his pampered self or Harry moving past his biases against Snape, it requires a combination of right knowledge, confronting painful reality, and cultivating right intellectual habits.
Ultimately, the moral message of the series, the one Voldemort fundamentally rejects, is embodied by the cycle of the Phoenix. The Phoenix represents moral regeneration, where true remorse requires a dying to the self that committed the wrong. You have to renounce the flawed, selfish past self and emerge from the ashes as a new person.
And Voldemort's entire existence was dedicated to avoiding this death.
His fate is the terrifying culmination of a character that refused this death and rebirth, clinging to life and power through unnatural means, making him increasingly unnatural and ultimately irreparable. The ultimate victory of love is that it enables life by accepting death. Voldemort spread death by clinging pathologically to life, whereas Dumbledore and Harry moved to a deeper, more meaningful life by accepting mortality.
And that profound acceptance of mortality is the final, essential philosophical lesson. Harry's willingness to walk to his death in the Forbidden Forest for the common good aligns him with philosophical exemplars like Socrates, who chose to die for what they believed was the rational and moral choice, regardless of the external outcome.
He does.
Dumbledore's wisdom, delivered in that transcendent King's Cross space, provides the final piece of the puzzle that connects character, choice, and mortality. He tells Harry, "You are the true master of death, because the true master does not seek to run away from death. He accepts that he must die, and understands that there are far, far worse things in the living world than dying."
This reminds you that character, forged by free and intentional choice, is what matters above all else. The great challenge of the wizarding world isn't fighting dark magic. It's living a moral life, knowing that your choices have potentially infinite significance, regardless of what fate, magic, or prophecy may suggest.
And if the concept of Lockean identity in the wizarding world is so fragile, if memory charms and Polyjuice Potion can so easily erase or replace who you are, it raises the question, given all the magic that can alter your memories, what is the one internal thing you hold on to that proves definitively who you really are? Something to ponder the next time you think you know yourself completely.